They gave me Vicodin after my knee surgery. They kept prescribing it, so I kept taking it. I didn't know it would be this addictive. I didn't know how far I'd go to get more.
Opioid dependence can happen after just 5 days. Know the truth, spread the truth.
Hello, and welcome to Cleveland Honors, a program dedicated to educating you about our justice system and the people behind it. Today, in this episode, we will talk with 8th District Court of Appeals Judge Sean C. Gallagher, a former Cleveland Municipal Court judge. Welcome, Judge Gallagher. And
Thank you, Judge Patton.
Good seeing you.
Great to see you.
You've been a judge now how many years?
Yeah, quite a while. It's been over 20.
Tell me about your early life and how you grew up in this community.
Well, I was born and raised in Cleveland, and I still live in the city of Cleveland. I'm very proud to be a resident of the city of Cleveland. And I grew up on the west side on West 122nd Street, and went to Catholic schools all my life, and went on to our alma mater, Ohio University, and then went on to Cleveland Marshall College of Law and served a stint in the prosecutor's office, and then was fortunate enough by the voters of Cleveland to be elected to the Cleveland Municipal Court in 1997. Well,
and you left a legacy there. But before we get to what you did in Cleveland Municipal Court, tell me, where'd you go to high school?
I went to St. Ed's. I was the son of 2 Irish immigrant parents who were very staunch Roman Catholics and wanted me to get a Catholic education and insisted that I go. And so I guess my options were St. Ignatius and St. Edward. And being an Eagle, I'm a St. Edward guy. And you're an Eagle too, so.
Oh yes, we have some things in common. John F. Kennedy Eagles.
Yes.
Now, St. Ed's prepared you well for Ohio University?
It really did. It was a good education. But I really enjoyed growing up in my neighborhood on the west side. It was a lot of fun, and still have friends from that neighborhood.
I bet you do. Tell me about the Bobcat Days. What was your major down there?
I was basically a political science major. I really was unsure of what I wanted to do, and I really had the fortune of one summer, I had an aunt who was working as a custodian in the juvenile court building, and I had an opportunity to work in the summer in a summer program. And it was my first exposure to the law. I had no one in my family that had ever been involved in the law at all. My father was a union laborer. My mother was a waitress. And here was a kid from the West 122nd Street that suddenly saw this whole other world of lawyers and judges and police officers and all this just a complete difference for me. And so I got interested in it.
Juvenile court, was that the old juvenile court building?
2163 East 22nd Street. Yeah.
Tell me what happened in that building that you remember.
It was just the diverse personalities, the judges. There was really everybody from Judge Toner to Judge Betty Willis Rubin. John F. Corrigan was there for a time, and there was a myriad of Walter Whitlatch. He was even there when I was there. But it was just a very different. Judge Leotis Harris, who was really great to me. And just learning and getting exposed to the law was really a great opportunity there.
But you were a custodian.
I was I was sweeping the floors. But there's a saying, Charles, that the person who cleans a building knows more about what's going on in the building than anybody else. Okay. And let me tell you, I did hear a lot of things in that building as a custodian. Okay. But it really was a real eye-opening experience, because I would go around and get to see things, and because I wasn't in the middle of it, I got to take it in my own way. And it was really a life lesson that wasn't lost on me. And so from there, I started to have an interest in the law.
And this was a summer job while you were in college?
Summer job while I was at Ohio University.
Okay. Did you decide you wanted to be a lawyer while you were in college, or what made you
I knew I wanted to get involved in government somehow. If it would have been law, that would be great, but some form or another, I suddenly got the itch, I suppose, by being exposed to that in juvenile court. So I think it wasn't much longer from that eventually I decided that law would be a good field to get exposed to.
So you absolutely went from the bottom to the top.
I started at the ground floor, is what I tell people.
Okay. Now, while you were doing this summer job, did you get a chance to see any trials?
Yeah, at the very end, late in the day, I would come in the afternoon to start my shift, and most of the big action was in the morning, but there were a lot of times where there were hearings in the afternoon, and I'd get to see it and saw some great young lawyers. In fact, one of our colleagues that we will talk about, is where I first met Larry Jones. Oh. He was in the county prosecutor's office at the time, and I first saw him in action as a prosecutor over there.
And little did you know.
Yeah, he would go on to leave and become a councilman and go from there.
And he's with you in the Court of Appeals
Sure,
now.
To this day. In fact, I had a case with him today.
So. Oh, okay. Small world.
Yeah.
Small. Well, please tell him I said hi.
I will,
We're going to try and have him on the show.
Yeah, he's looking forward to it.
Okay. Now, you go to OU. You're a poli-sci major. Where'd you go to law school?
Well, I went to Cleveland Marshall College of Law, but I didn't go right away. I worked for a while first. I worked at the Metzenbaum Children's Center for a while, and then I worked out at the Hudson Youth Center.
Okay.
And this was all kind of a transition from my days of just being in juvenile court, even as a janitor, that people said, all right, well, you worked in juvenile court. How about if you try this or try that? And they were really great jobs. I got to work with kids, got to interact with folks and really try to make a difference in a way. And then being involved in politics, Don Nugent was running for judge, and nobody gave him a chance at the time. He was running against a pretty heavyweight, a political heavyweight, but as fate would have it, he won. And he said, listen, kid, you be my bailiff, but you got to go to law school. It's time for you to go. So I had taken the test and got accepted.
Is that the same Judge Luncheon that's in federal court now?
Same judge and now federal judge, yeah.
So you were his bailiff?
Yeah.
So as soon as he got elected?
Worked for him, and it was a great opportunity. I mean, the doors that people open for you can be lasting in your life in many ways.
Okay.
So,
And I remember you being his bailiff and going into that courtroom.
That just tells you how old you are, Charles.
But I didn't realize the story about you helping him when he was running for judge first time. So you learned some things about politics too.
It was a really great experience being involved in politics, and like I say, when I was young in Cleveland, my first councilman was Dennis Kucinich. So, and he wasn't that much older than I was, and I still count him as a friend to this day. He's a very interesting guy, and growing up in his ward, you learn politics in a very fundamental way.
Did you see him campaigning when he was running for city council?
I remember my father was cutting the lawn on 122nd Street, and this young kid comes walking up the street, knocking on doors, shaking hands, and he met my father and talked to him. And I said, Dad, what is that young guy? What is he selling something? He says, no, that kid's going to be our next councilman because he's outworking everybody. And that's how we got there. Okay,
and he was a politician that walked the streets.
Yeah, and I think he's changed a lot over the years too. He had his moments, but I always thought he was a great guy, and he was always very good to me and loyal to me, and I have nothing but fond memories of him.
For people who don't know, why don't you tell us what does a bailiff do?
A bailiff really is the person that really manages the day-to-day docket for the judge, and they really are the judge's point person, and they handle a lot of the scheduling, a lot of the continuing, a lot of the soothing of frayed nerves for people that are waiting to get their cases heard, and so they have to work in many ways, and I think it's changed a lot now. Even for your bailiff, probably today, it's probably more difficult with all the social media and the electronics and everything else that maybe I didn't have to deal with. I didn't have to worry about a phone going off in the courtroom. Unlike today.
Every day.
But yeah, it was a good lesson in law, because not only did I learn how to really deal with people better, being in that role, but being a representative of a judge, you really learned how significant that was, how important that was to the public, and so it was a great training ground. And I got to watch some of the best lawyers, the old timers, Tom Shaughnessy and Jack Hudson, and then the Marshall Nurembergs, the big heavyweight civil lawyers that would come in and try cases. So it was a great experience.
Okay. Now, did you go to night school or day school?
I did. I went to night school. I worked all through school. I worked, so it I spent many an hour in the jury room studying after those cases. But it was a good lesson. It was a good life lesson.
Okay, so bailiff went to school at night, got to see some of the most impressive attorneys in the city of Cleveland up in that courtroom. There were probably some students in school with you that were envious of you.
Yeah, I think I really had the great job because they were trying to learn all the terms that I was exposed to every day in my job. So it made law school was almost fun for me because they'd talk about a case and I said, well, I just watched that kind of a case. So it was an easy learning experience in that way. It was very, very good, very positive.
Okay. You decided to run for judge. When?
Well, I first did my stint I became a prosecutor. I always thought that the one thing I wanted to do was stand up in front of a jury and try cases. And as you know, having been in the city prosecutor's office, there's no place like that than to go into a prosecutor's office to try cases. So I was very blessed to do it. And it really was great. And I worked under really a legendary person in Cleveland history. Well, two really, John T. Corrigan, but Stephanie Tubbs Jones was incredible to me. The way she took me on and really helped me develop myself, I think, in a way that was very positive and engaging with people. I learned a great deal from her, and working in that office, she gave me some of the biggest cases that were going on at the time, entrusted me with them, and she was always a true friend and a great mentor to me for my experiences. And I really, really miss that aspect of her passing. So, but yeah, it was great. So I did my time there, and Judge Sal Calandra retired, and a lot of folks said, you should run for that. You've been in the city all your life. You've been involved in politics all your life. You should run. And I was blessed that the voters selected me. So
okay. I have to ask, do you have a bow tie like Calandra?
No, I didn't. But man, he really knew how to wear those ties. Yeah, he was a real gentleman. He really was. Very nice guy. Yeah.
Yes, I remember him fondly, just because he taught me a lot when I was a prosecutor. And Stephanie, did you know her before you?
Sure. Oh yeah, I knew her when she was a municipal judge, and then when she went on to become a common pleas judge. And in fact, Donnell Brown and I helped Donnell out with her campaign when she ran for the Supreme Court. A lot of people don't realize she actually ran for the Supreme Court. She was unsuccessful, but she almost beat a sitting Supreme Court justice. Very narrowly lost it, and that was in the mid-'80s.
I remember that campaign and how hard everybody worked in northern Ohio to support her.
It was a big deal to get somebody from our part of the state elected and a Democrat, frankly.
Yeah. And so, I remember the campaigning of those years and all the, how Stephanie was one of those tireless people that would shake everybody's hands and say hi to everybody and ask for a vote.
And, just to show you how nice she was, about 2 weeks before she passed, I got a phone call, and it was her on the phone calling me from her office in Washington. And years earlier, there had been an intern from the old Soviet Union that had come over to Cleveland. And she had paired him up with me only because she knew my parents were immigrants.
Okay.
And she said, well, you'll be best for him to hang around if you don't mind. And I said, of course not, I'll do it. This guy had gone on now to become some big official in the Ukraine and was in her office. And she remembered that he had been paired with me and called me on the phone to put him on the phone with me. So that's how much she could connect with people. She knew her way around,
I have fond memories of Stephanie from elementary school.
Sure.
It goes back that far. And so you were a West Sider, I was an East Sider, but our paths crossed a couple of times with a couple of different people. Cleveland Municipal Court. I got to get to Cleveland Municipal Court right now. What made you decide to run?
It was really the people's court, and it was about people, and I enjoyed that. I enjoyed that interaction, and I really felt, and I went down, and when I was in the prosecutor's office, I would volunteer to go down and work 3D. That was the initial appearance room where all the people that had gotten arrested would be initially brought in before a judge. And I remember Carl Stokes was a municipal court judge in those days, and I used to be the 3D prosecutor. And talk about another legend in Cleveland history.
Yes.
And so he was fun to practice in front of. He was, he's a very knowledgeable guy and a great trial lawyer, and he knew his way around, the courtroom. Most people know him as a mayor, but first and foremost, he was a trial attorney. And I really learned a lot from him, and I enjoyed it. And so when that spot became open and Judge Gallagher was retiring, I said, I got to try for this. So that was really about the people, though.
Okay. And I remember Judge Stokes also. I was his first city prosecutor.
Okay, yeah.
And if we had a question about something, we would open a book and go through it, rules of evidence or whatever. And I learned a lot from him just by him doing that. And
if you look at his Promises of Power book, his autobiography, the first whole part of that book is him in Cleveland Municipal Court. Yeah.
Good.
He has a lot to say.
Tell me about some of the stuff that happened while you were a judge.
Well, it was great. I mean, Cleveland Municipal Court in the 90s when I joined it was in a real, I guess we all like to personalize the era that we lived in or worked in it. But for me, it was one of the greatest times of the court. We were led by Judge Larry Jones, who really was the greatest administrative judge I've ever served with or been around. He had an innate ability to work with other people within a structure and to get everybody else to paddle in the same direction and work together consistently. He was able to do it at so many different levels, financially, socially, politically. He was able to keep everybody swimming and pushing in the same direction. And it was great because we started a lot of, I think, new things that were creative and beneficial for the residents of Cleveland, and still maintained our independence as judges.
Good. I'll tell you what, right now we're going to take a short break. We're going to be back and continue our conversation with Judge Gallagher shortly. Thank you. Welcome back to Cleveland Honors. Today we're talking with Judge Sean Gallagher. We were talking about the Cleveland Municipal Court when we took a break, and Judge Carl Stokes, who went on to become an ambassador. How long was he there, and how long were you there?
Well, he was gone as a judge by the time I got elected, but I remember when he first got elected, he became the administrative judge in his first year with the court. So he was there for a few years at least, and he did make a pretty significant impact on the court. I mean, the leadership of it. But for me, Larry Jones was my administrative judge.
Okay. And
really was the leader of our court.
Okay. What significant do you remember happening when you were a judge at the Cleveland Municipal Court? Well, and we call the Cleveland Municipal Court the People's Court.
Sure, and it definitely is. And I think really what was significant in that era of the court, and I think continuing today with the things that you're trying to accomplish, is that the court needed to become integrated into the community and help support the events that were going on and activities that were going on in the community. I think prior to the 90s, there was probably a little bit of a disconnect between the community and the court. The court just tended to serve as a hearing grounds for offenses or whatever. But more and more with the changes in society, mental health issues, substance abuse issues, all these various issues that affect a neighborhood and a community in a city like Cleveland, the courts had to get involved in and had to take a more enterprising role. And I really credit Larry Jones with starting that. He really recognized it and got us moving in that direction, to specialized dockets, to trying to be more proactive in the community.
Well, Judge Jones credited you with starting the TIP program.
That's very nice of them, and it was really an opportunity for us. We had so many licensing and problems in Cleveland with people getting their driver's license or having them suspended, and it was very frustrating for not only them, those that were in trouble with the law over that, but judges and court personnel that were trying to resolve these cases. So we came up with a plan to try to do some intervention and help people find out, what is it that I have to do to get my license? What is it going to take? Can I do some remedial classes to try to lessen my fees? So we set up a whole program, and this was on the cusp of a lot of new technology. We were able to get some BMV, Bureau of Motor Vehicle computers, brought down to the court, get staff trained on them, begin a process where information could get shared quickly and efficiently, and literally help people who really were driving to work, and they might have had a problem over not having insurance once or having a ticket once, and suddenly their license is suspended. And we all know in our society, if you can't get there, you ain't going to be able to work or provide for your family or anybody else. So it was really Larry, though, that created the atmosphere that allowed a lot of folks, a lot of judges, to come up with different ideas. And he came up with the drug court idea, and really was our first drug court leader, and really did a phenomenal job on it. And that was a great concept, where we would get people into treatment earlier and really try to help people.
And drug court's still going on. We still have our graduations. We're getting people treatment rather than incarceration.
And you have a veterans court, I understand. I got to see it today.
I run the veterans court, and there's a drug court component in the veterans court. So I appreciate what you guys did to start that back then. But how did drug court really get started? Was everybody on board to start it?
No, it was not. There was a lot of people that felt drugs are bad and we should prosecute everybody, and that's fine. That we understand that, but we also felt that there had to be a component of treatment, and we didn't want people at these low-level offenses to necessarily be stuck with felony convictions. They can't get jobs. They can't get licensed to do anything. So we wanted to find a way where we would hold people accountable that were using drugs, but do it in a way that made sense, both economically and for the community. And again, I got to give Stephanie Tubbs Jones a lot of credit, because she stuck her neck out as the county prosecutor at the time, saying she would allow for our court, the Cleveland Municipal Court, to take on this task and take on this role when the Common Pleas Court judges at that time didn't want it. They now have embraced it and do it as well. But at that time, it was voted down in that court.
About what year was this?
This would have been the mid to late 1990s.
Okay.
And Larry came in and really set up a docket for it. And it wasn't just simply as starting a docket and starting a court like that. He had to get a lot of different social agency groups involved, treatment centers, counselors, the probation department, all these different entities to buy in and then offer their resources. Psychiatric services, all this different stuff that just wasn't coordinated in those days.
Before that, it was plead guilty, go to jail.
It was plead guilty, go to jail, and if you were lucky enough maybe to have money where somebody had medical insurance that might provide something for you, that might happen, but it was few and far between. If you got caught, you got caught.
Okay.
And now I just think it's a more proactive approach. People are still held accountable. We're not going to let people just, take drugs and ruin neighborhoods. We are going to hold them accountable, but we're trying to do it in a way where we get them off of the drugs. And that's why I credit your court of keeping these programs going and improving on them, frankly, from what we had.
And we learn something every day. Every day, because the addiction needs a treatment. And if we put somebody in jail and don't give them treatment, they come out of jail, they're still a junkie. They still have their desires, their addiction. So there was a purpose for that. Now, the makeup of Cleveland Municipal Court while you were a judge, who was on that court with you?
Well, it was a strange, not really strange. It was in a transition period. We had for the large sum of time that I was there, it was a mix of young and old, but it was more than that. We had 6 African American and 6 white judges. We had 6 men and 6 women. We had 6 new and 6 old. We had a little bit of everything. And again, I really credit Larry with bringing everybody together. And we started a tradition back then that still holds true to this day, and that was the Judges Luncheon. And I credit Larry with this. He said, all right, we're going to sit down together, we're going to get along, and one of us is going to be responsible each month for bringing the meal. And so we started that, and everybody brought, and believe me, these were some lavish meals because people tried to outdo each other. And so they would bring, a really big spread of food, and so much so that the staff loved it because they would all end up eating too.
Yes.
But it was a way of getting everybody to buy in to, even if we were from different backgrounds or different parts of the city, we had a duty and a commitment to the residents, to the people. And it really made for a good mix. And it was funny because we would go to each other's events. And it was one of the first times I was going to, I learned the difference between what an African AME church is and a Southern Baptist church is. And I didn't know that before that.
Okay.
But I learned, and same thing. I mean, a lot of judges would come out to my church, a Roman Catholic church on the west side. And see things that they didn't always see.
Yeah.
So
there are different forms of Roman Catholic churches.
Yeah, I mean,
and Greek Orthodox.
Sure, you're right. And so it was a good, it was really a wonderful experience working with a diverse background of judges that we all got along. We all had each other's back, but judges, veteran judges like Mabel Jasper and C. Ellen Conley, who was a great historian in her own right. And then there were younger judges like me that came up, like Kathleen Keogh and Mary Kilbane, Bob Triazzi, who's now the county law director.
Right.
And so it was really wonderful. But Ron Adrian was there, and he's a legacy in Cleveland for all the years he served, going back, I think, to 1981.
Well, I'm glad you told me about the judges' luncheons, because we still do that.
That's great.
The competition is still there to outdo each other, and I appreciate it, and so does staff. You had to get out into the neighborhoods, and Earl Turner started a program, I think, while you were a judge.
Yeah, we were. We had the town hall meeting concept, and Earl really felt that Earl was a former councilman. He understood, boots on the ground and getting out to the community and making sure people understood what was going on. And as Earl saw a lot of these programs come online, traffic intervention, drug court, different support systems within the probation department, I think he appreciated that we need to get this message out there better. We need to go out into the community and start having a series of meetings in town hall formats, invite the public there, and by whatever means, get them to show up, and then give them the information. And it really turned out to be a wonderful setting. I don't know, sometimes I think it was a little hard on the housing court judge, because he would get most of the questions.
Yes, it still happens that way.
But it was really a wonderful opportunity to get out there, and people felt a sense that, okay, these judges aren't so removed. It made you have to realize who you really worked for. You couldn't sit up in your ivory tower. You had to go out there and meet Mrs. Smith and Mrs. So-and-so and interact and make sure they felt confident in you.
And that started while you were there, and I take it that's when you found out the difference between the AME and the AME
sure,
Zion
yeah,
and the Baptist and Southern Baptist.
And going to funerals and learning about it, and yeah, it was, okay. But it's a great experience, I think, for, somebody from me who came from just a humble background. And then you get exposed to so much new and different things, and then you learn, hey, the more people are different, the more they're the same.
Yes, because we're still doing that, and it's good to get across to the other side of town with some judges and see the community and learn a little history lesson. Yeah. Judge Pianca was the housing court judge for years. Who was the housing court judge when
he was the housing court judge. I think Judge Fleming was before him. And then he left, and Pianca came in. Pianca came in 1995, I believe.
Okay, so you got to be
97. But I worked with Judge Ray Pianca, and one of the amazing things about him was you could give him an address anywhere in the city of Cleveland, and he would know what was there. Like you could tell him a number in a street, and he would say, "Yeah, that's so and so, or that's this business or that business." He knew them all.
it was amazing just walking down the street with him, because he would give you a history lesson and would know who owned the building, violations which were taken care of, and even know who had the prettiest flower beds in the neighborhood. So it was really nice to get around town with people like Bianca and some other judges. Let's get back to drug court for a minute. Drug court graduations, were they different when you first started, or do you remember?
Yeah, it was, the first ones we were so worried that were the people going to make it, because we were afraid they would kill the program. Like, we were afraid people were looking for failure. That if we incurred a failure, people would think, see, that doesn't work, you shouldn't have done that. But I'm telling you, folks, we had a really good track record early on, and I'm not sure if it was just the strength of the people that were in it, but it really, really worked out well, and people began to transition well. And in fact, one of the greatest success stories of drug court, as far as I'm concerned, was a woman named Valerie, who came into my court, and she was in a bad way with substance abuse. And we figured, all right, we're going to give you a chance. You can go into this drug court program. And Larry took her under her wing and worked with her. And she had some setbacks, but eventually she graduated. And the greatest story about it is, not only did she graduate, but we ended up hiring her as a secretary in our court. So if that doesn't speak to how a court and a program can change a person's life, I don't know what does. But she was a real, sadly, she's since passed, not from substance abuse, but she was a real success story.
Well, and she's a legend around the courthouse.
Yes,
she's
really
a true
was
legend.
She was a great lady.
Did a lot to help some people,
Yeah.
so I'm glad you remembered her, because I had heard about her when I got there.
Yeah, she was something else.
And we have another program we started since you left, Get on Track, which takes high school graduates, and as a condition of probation, we put them back in school, get them their high school degrees, and it's much easier.
I think that's Judge Groves, wasn't that Judge Groves?
Judge Groves and Judge
Yeah.
Moore
Sure.
started the program. When I came in, I just joined them, and we moved it along. But it's easier for somebody to find a job with that high school degree than without it. And I was over in Cleveland Clinic a couple of weeks ago and parked my car at the valet, and the valet who was in charge of the valets was one of our graduates from the Get on Track program. So we see those benefits.
The court has an effect on people in a way that you wouldn't always believe, but it's true.
Now, you're a Court of Appeals judge now. Tell me how you like that and what you're doing.
Well, I'll tell you what I don't like about it is you don't see as many people as you do in Cleveland Municipal Court, which is difficult, and I enjoy that interaction with people. But I will say it is a very rewarding job. It is a wonderful job if you're a student of the law, because you really get every kind of case imaginable, from murder to a petty theft to the biggest corporate lawsuit to the personal injury. You get a little bit of everything in the Court of Appeals. And so it makes for a very interesting study of law. But it is very librarian-like, and you do not have interaction with the public. There are some times where we find ourselves, those of us that came from Cleveland Muni, and there are quite a few of us there now, we find ourselves walking around looking for people to talk to.
Yes.
I can't take that out of our blood.
I don't have that problem in Cleveland Muni.
No, you don't.
Plenty of people.
I was in your courtroom today, and I saw how many people you have.
Well, who from Cleveland Muni is over in Court of Appeals with you?
The first person that went over was Judge Colleen Conway Cooney.
Okay.
And she went over there, and she had worked in the Court of Appeals years earlier, so it was a natural move for her. And then I went next. And after I went, it was a run on the Court of Appeals and that's a real testament to what great judges we had in Cleveland Muni, that so many of them went on. Judge Mary Kilbane, Judge Kathy Keogh, Judge Anita Laster-Mays, Judge Larry Jones, and even, I will say, Judge Patricia Ann Blackman, who was the city prosecutor and worked in Cleveland Municipal Court for many, many years.
That's right.
All migrated over to the Court of Appeals. And that really speaks a lot about the quality of the judges that come out of Cleveland Municipal Court, that you get that kind of training, experience, and exposure to the public and the community that you can move and transition into that is really a testament to those folks and that court.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you're enjoying it. I read your opinions and take your advice. You also do some CLEs, continuing legal education classes that you lecture on.
Yeah, it's a good way for me to try to take what I'm learning in the Court of Appeals and try to compile it. You know, we have a sense that it's very demanding what you do in your role when you have 50 to 100 people a day and having to make judgments on. And we're blessed in the Court of Appeals, we can take our time and read everything. A trial judge really has to be just that, a trial judge. It's demanding. So one of the things I like to do is, as I'm going through all these cases, is pull out what's important and compile it in some format that we can then give back to the trial judges in a way that helps them so they can minimize the mistakes they might otherwise not make. Or they might make, but we try to minimize that. So it's really a great opportunity for me to give back in that way to them.
Good. Well, we appreciate it. We really do. And your classes are some of the more entertaining classes that I've been to.
We try to make it that way.
Domestic violence cases. That's one of our bigger issues in Cleveland Muni Court also. But changes came about from the time you were a young prosecutor.
Sure.
To today. When you're a Court of Appeals judge. Tell me how it was before you started.
Yeah, well.
And what it's turned into now.
You know, domestic violence is not something new. It's been around for forever. I think we probably pay more attention to it now than we did in the past. And in fact, in the past, there were many times when I was a prosecutor when a woman would come in and she was obviously had been injured, but she would say she wanted to drop the charges. And we would go along with that. I don't know if it was just the way we were back then. It was just culturally, we said, okay, you don't want to prosecute? Okay, we'll drop the charges. Well, it was really one of our colleagues, Judge Ron Adrian, who kind of changed that mentality. He put his foot down and said, you know, we're not doing these folks any favors by just, you know, closing the book on this stuff, because it's happening again and again and again. And I think he was the first judge that really saw the pattern of abuse that would happen, where the women would be coming in 2 months later, 3 months later, 6 months later. Same thing would happen again and again and again. And so he's the one I credit, frankly, with putting his foot down and starting to educate us about the need to take this seriously. And he had to fight for, I think, a good 10 years before he was able to change people's mentality and perception about domestic violence. And it really has, I think, benefited. It's gotten abusers more help. It's taken women out of those settings that were otherwise might have been killed if they had stayed in them. And frankly, he's written the legal book on it. And for 20 years, if you wanted to know about the domestic violence cases, he was the guy you went to.
Yeah, I remember him going to Columbus to lobby the legislature to change the law to allow the prosecutor's office to just call the police officers without the need of the victim, who was the battered woman at the time, to be a witness and continue the case. So,
I mean, I credit him with saving a lot of lives. I really do. I think it's one of those things where not only did the law change, but I think the perception about the behavior changed. We had to take a different perspective on it, and it took a lot of us time to get our hands around that, but I credit him with doing it.
Yeah, and he also gets credit with the Community Court Service Program, Community Work Service. And you saw that come about during your time.
It was amazing, because we knew these folks couldn't pay a lot of outrageous fines, but you still had to have people be accountable to the neighborhood, to the community. And it was great that people could go out there and you know, help clean up the freeway or help clean up a roadway or a park that had, you know, been littered or something, and they would go out and clean it for the residents, and that way the residents knew that, hey, this guy may have driven down the street with a loud noise car, playing loud music, but he's going to go out there and clean the park now as his punishment for that. And it was a great way of doing it. And yeah, there were thousands and thousands of hours spent through the Community Work Service that Ron helped get that really pushed into our court.
And when I was on city council, I would call and ask Community Work Service people to come out and clean up a park, a street corner where the bus stop was just overflowing with litter because the city just didn't have the resources to get their crews out there all over the city. So it still works for me.
Yeah, it's great.
Now, you did a CLE class on Don King.
I did.
One of the famous cases he was involved in. Can you give us a synopsis?
Yeah, it was Map v. Ohio, and for Cleveland residents out there, just so they know, Map v. Ohio is probably one of the top 3 criminal cases in American history. And it happened right here in Cleveland. And it's an amazing story. If you read the case, you wouldn't know of all the personalities that were involved in this case and who Dolly Mapp was. And she had come to Cleveland as a small child from Texas in search of a better life, like many people. And she ended up marrying Jimmy Bivens, who was a famous Cleveland boxer.
Yes, a world champion, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was a world champion. And she became involved in the fight world, and naturally, the fight world wasn't that far away from the underworld in many ways. But she was involved with Don King, knew Don King, and the numbers rackets and things like that. And lo and behold, the police were in search of one of the numbers guys, and they ended up at her door wanting to search her house without a warrant. And as every American should know, a man or a woman's home is his or her castle. And if the police want to come in, unless there's some exigent circumstance, they got to have a warrant. And in this case, they did not have a warrant. But they went in anyway, and they found some gambling paraphernalia and some pornographic materials that were held by a boarder of Dolly Mapp. They weren't Dolly Mapp's, but of course she got charged with it. Well, one thing you can say about Dolly Mapp was she was a fighter, and she took her case all the way to the United States Supreme Court and won, prevailed. And that case today stands for the proposition that if the police are going to come in your residence, they have to have a warrant, they have to have probable cause for why they're coming in. And so it's a great story of the personalities of Cleveland, too, all the different individuals, the great lawyers that were involved in that case.
Which lawyers were involved?
Well, I mean, folks from like the ACLU, Seymour Terrell, and all these great litigators that came in and were, and frankly, Lou Stokes was involved in the case for a time, Jack Day, and there were some, and there was a woman who was the prosecutor initially that was really a great lady. She was in the county prosecutor's office for many, many years. She was originally from Toledo, and I'm missing her name right now, but did a fantastic job when women, were not prominent in the legal community.
And I can see her picture.
Yeah.
I can't remember her name. But John T. Corrigan was also...
Yeah, he's the one who appointed her to the case to handle the prosecution.
Was he the chief prosecutor?
Yeah, he was the county prosecutor.
Okay.
Yeah. The search happened back in 1959, so it was a different era. And here's an interesting story about Dolly Mapp that most people don't know. And I found this out about her. And she has since passed 2 years ago. When she went to Washington to watch the oral argument before the United States Supreme Court, she had to stay in a segregated hotel because in 1963 there was still segregation in Washington in many of the hotels, so she had to stay in a segregated hotel.
Yeah, I remember my mother telling me about that when she would go to Washington before I was born, and segregated town.
Yeah, so it was a different world, but like I say, those kind of cases happen in Cleveland, and it's unbelievable when you think of Terry v. Ohio. Even the stop and frisk case happened right on Euclid Avenue, and we use that case every day in our courtrooms.
Yes, we do. Some landmark cases came out of this city, and thank you for the lesson. I appreciate going down memory lane with you.
Very nice.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Cleveland Honors. And remember, as Martin Luther King Jr. once said, true peace is not the mere absence of tension. It is the presence of justice. So long, everyone.